I was really concerned about, I thought his face looked puffy and swollen, which would happen if you are putting a grown man's weight on someone's neck. I noticed some fluid coming from what looked like George Floyd's body, and in a lot of cases we see a patient release their bladder when they die. I can't tell you exactly where the fluid was coming from, but that's where my mind went. He wasn't moving. He was being restrained, but he wasn't moving.
He was being restrained, but he wasn't moving. All right, everybody. We are in day 3 now. Day 2 was yesterday. Day 2, Genevieve Hansen, who is a firefighter, a Minneapolis firefighter, and also, an EMT, not a paramedic, an EMT, testified to many, many disturbing facts. And one of those facts is that George Floyd, when she came upon the scene, was being restrained but was not moving. Now, why is that important? That is important because once a suspect is no longer a threat, once a suspect is subdued, once a suspect is in handcuffs, you would think they would get their knee off his neck. See? And anything after that point would be excessive. Now, the cross-examination yesterday of Genevieve Hansen was, pretty bizarre. It sort of backfired on them, as does most of their cross-examinations.
There was, again, you described a fairly large crowd, 10, 12 people that were all in that general area. Mm-hmm. And several people were yelling, right?
Right.
And some people were yelling louder than others, right?
Right.
And a lot of people were saying things like, get off of him, right?
Right.
And a lot of people, you yourself were saying, I want to know what his pulse is.
Yeah.
Right? And some people were swearing.
Absolutely.
And would you describe other people's demeanors as upset or angry?
I don't know if you've seen anybody be killed, but it's upsetting.
Whoops.
The answer is
yes, I was just going to object.
Yeah, so that's called a backfire, is what that is. When you ask a leading question, which you're allowed to do on cross-examination, and it just backfires right in your face. Boom! Backfire. I don't know, sir, if you've ever seen anybody being killed/murdered, but it's pretty upsetting. It's pretty freaking upsetting. Okay, and then on redirect, they asked her, well, how did you feel knowing that you could have helped and that you were prevented from doing so by these police officers who had a restrained man not moving under their knee?
When you couldn't do that, how did that make you feel?
Totally distressed.
Were you frustrated?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll happen when you're able to give CPR or chest compressions and you're not allowed to because somebody's murdering the person right in front of you and has a badge, a gun, and some mace. All right, so now we're live, and this morning in this morning's trial, we saw some witnesses. We saw a witness named Chris Martin. Chris Martin, also 19 years old. You know, the more that you watch this trial, the more upsetting it becomes because the more you realize that there are videos you haven't seen. Number one, we just saw the body cam footage from the police officers, and it's really freaking upsetting. But the other thing that's really upsetting is that I never realized until yesterday's witnesses that there were so many kids that saw this, that there were so many kids who are going to be traumatized for the rest of their lives because they saw a man be murdered in front of their faces by a person in a uniform who's supposed to be there to protect and serve the community. Yeah. Well, the kid, is there any way to charge these cops with child endangerment too? I don't know. But it's really, it's bizarre to find out that there was a 9-year-old present, there was a 16-year-old present, a 17-year-old present. We heard from a kid today, he's pretty much a kid, he's 19 years old, his name is Chris Martin. He was working in the store on May 25th, the day that George Floyd was killed. And he was the actual counter person, the cashier on that day, who took the $20 bill from George Floyd. And he said the color of the bill was off. And so he sort of kind of knew that it was a counterfeit bill, but he didn't know what he was looking for, really, because he said he held it up to the light. And the question was, well, did you know what you were looking for? And he said, not really, no. Well, did you have any experience in counterfeit bill? And he said, no, not really. I didn't really know. I had seen one before during that day. So somebody was passing around this counterfeit bill or bills in this neighborhood. And this kid, Chris Martin, understood that the manager had told him that if he accepted a counterfeit bill, then it would come out of his paycheck. And you know what Chris Martin testified to today, this 19-year-old boy? He testified that he wishes that's what he would have done. He wishes that he just would have let it go and that he wouldn't have done anything about this and that he could have had it taken out of his paycheck and then George Floyd would still be alive. And you know what all these witnesses have in common? Guilt. They all are traumatized by their own inability to help or stop this. The 9-year-old, the 17-year-old, Genevieve Hansen over there, who is a new, 2-year firefighter, and this guy Chris Martin today, just brought to tears, saying, I wish I could have done something. I really wish I could have done it differently because then he'd be alive. I never expected this to happen. Who would think that a man would end up dead because of a nonviolent crime? Oh, and by the way, Chris Martin also testified to just how stoned was George Floyd. And he said he knew he was high. It was obvious that George Floyd was high, but he wasn't out of it. He obviously could do the transaction. He asked for cigarettes. He knew which brand he wanted. Chris Martin was able to fetch that brand for him, put it on the counter. Floyd was able to give him the 20. Chris Martin made change, gave him the change. He was able to conduct himself in a lucid manner throughout the entire transaction. In fact, he was kind of stretching like a runner stretches. He was doing like side lunges and everything. And he said the only reason why he thought he was high, this cashier, only reason why he thought George Floyd was high is because he was speaking slower than a normal conversation would roll. And he could tell they were talking about baseball. And he could tell that, it was taking a little long for him to form a sentence. So that's how. But they actually, are diffusing the defense arguments that George Floyd was a menace to society because he was wasted, he was out of control, that he knowingly passed a counterfeit bill. I mean, they're discussing all of the issues that the defense is going to say were so criminal that he had to die. Up front, it's preemptive. These are all preemptive strikes to get on the record. Just how stoned was he? Just how criminal was he? Was he able to walk out of the store on his own? Was he able to count change on his own? Was he able to? Yes, he was. So it doesn't look like he was near death. No, and in fact, the autopsy that Michael Baden, who Michael Baden is. I mean, Michael Baden is the world-renowned forensic pathologist who does autopsies in almost every high-profile case. In fact, he has his own show called Autopsy. Michael Baden did the autopsy on George Floyd. And he concluded that George Floyd died of homicide, that he died because of decreased blood flow to his brain and decreased oxygen to his lungs, not just from a knee on his neck, but also to officers on his back. And that cause of death was homicide. Don't have time to